It was supposed to be a regular Tuesday afternoon. I'd just finished a shift at Midtown General Hospital, where I was wrapping up a residency in internal medicine. Exhausted but content, I was about to head to the parking garage when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was local. I answered anyway. "Hello, this is Ethan Moore." "Mr. Moore, this is Brenda Holt from Horizon First Bank. I'm calling to verify some information regarding a mortgage loan for a property at 815 Ridgeview Lane." I stopped walking. "Excuse me, I don't have any mortgage loans, certainly not for that address." Brenda hesitated, then lowered her voice slightly. "Sir, you're listed as a co-signer. The primary applicant is Logan Moore, your brother." My grip tightened on the phone. "Yes, that's my brother, but I never signed anything. The application was approved 7 months ago. We have digital and physical copies of the paperwork, including your signature." My legs went weak. I leaned against a pillar in the garage. "Please send me everything, every document." Within 15 minutes, the email arrived. I forwarded it to Jenna Blake, my best friend since college. And now a practicing civil attorney, I didn't even need to explain. Her reply was instant. "I'll be there in 20. By the time she arrived at my apartment, I had the documents open on my laptop. There it was, my full name, signature, and social security number, all scrawled onto a mortgage agreement for nearly $390,000. Jenna pointed at the signature line. "That loop in the E, that's your mom's handwriting." I stared at it in disbelief, and then it clicked. The health insurance forms my dad handed me at his birthday party last fall. The ones he said I just needed to sign renewal stuff, he had called it. My phone buzzed. It was my mom, I answered. "Then, honey, are you free tonight? I'm making your favorite stew." I nearly laughed. Funny, I just had a call from Horizon First Bank. Want to guess what it was about? Silence. Then softly, "I was going to tell you Logan needed help and we thought you could handle it." I swallowed hard. "You forged my name. You could ruin my career, my license." "Then you're overreacting. We're family. Families help each other." Jenna was sitting beside me, taking notes. I looked her way and whispered, "I'm going over there tonight. Logan better be there too." She nodded. "You want me to come with you?" "No, not yet. I need to hear it from them first." What started as a normal Tuesday had spiraled into a financial and emotional nightmare. And I knew deep down this was just the beginning. When I left my parents' restaurant that night, I didn't go home. I drove in silence for nearly an hour along the coastal roads outside Monterey, passing flickering street lamps and shuttered storefronts. My mind kept circling one phrase: "You already have everything, Reed." That night, I stayed at Iris's apartment, an old friend, and now a paralegal in the same law office I used to intern at before making detective. She made me tea and said little. That was why I trusted her. No judgment, no noise, just quiet presence. By morning, my phone buzzed with 3 missed calls from my father, a message from Olivia saying she was so sorry, and 2 unknown numbers. I ignored them all. I only answered one call that mattered: Brenna. "I found more," she said before I even said hello. "It's not just the mortgage and cards. There's a small business loan, opened 3 months ago under your name. The applicant listed the address of your parents' restaurant." I stopped mid-step, one hand gripping the stairwell railing of Iris's building. "I don't own a business," I said flatly. I know that Brenna replied. "But the system doesn't. We need to get in front of this before the fallout spreads." An hour later, I was at her office, hunched over her laptop with a pile of printed statements and forged applications. My name was everywhere. Every corner of this financial map was traced back to Reed Donovan, but none of the trails started with me. The signatures were nearly perfect, but I recognized something too polished, too smooth, my father's accountant handwriting digitized and duplicated. By that evening, my hands were trembling with fury. My father used to scold me for borrowing $20 from him in college without asking first. Now he thought it was acceptable to steal my identity and bury me in nearly $300,000 of debt. We put a freeze on my credit and filed identity theft claims with Equisure Horizon Bank and Westport Lending Group. Still, the damage was layered. The deeper we looked, the more it felt like peeling an onion soaked in gasoline. Every layer reeked of betrayal and threatened to burn. 2 days later, I got an email from an old neighbor, Mr. Finch, a retired Army vet who used to give me rides to school. The subject line read, "Need to talk urgent." I called him Reed's son. I hate to even bring this up. "But your father convinced me and a few of the guys from the golf club to invest in something called Blue Shore Equity. Said you were managing the fund and that you guaranteed solid returns." I closed my eyes for Finch. "I've never heard of that fund. I never touched a dime from it." His voice cracked. "I put in $50,000. That was my entire pension. Please tell me this isn't what I think it is." My stomach dropped. They weren't just wrecking my name. They were using it to bait the people who trusted them and me. I hung up and went straight to Brenna's office. Within an hour, we traced the so-called Blue Shore Equity back to a network of shell accounts, some tied to an address registered to a rental property in Nevada. The money flowed through 3 banks, bounced through a holding firm, and disappeared offshore. "This is organized fraud," Brenna said, her voice low and grim. "You're not just the victim anymore, Reed. They're using you to commit crimes." That night, I didn't sleep. I reread every document examined, every fake email account with my name on it, and finally opened the digital photo album on my phone. There it was, one from last month, my mother sitting on their restaurant patio smiling into the camera, a champagne flute in one hand. The caption read, "Family always wins." I stared at it until the screen blurred. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I went back to the restaurant, not for lunch, not for apologies. This time I brought a manila folder thick with paperwork, and Brenna stood beside me. My parents were there. So was Olivia. "Sit down," I said. My father crossed his arms. My mother said my name, like it was a warning. I opened the folder and laid it out in front of them. "These are the charges I'll be bringing to the Financial Crimes Unit unless I get full cooperation, asset recovery, and written confessions by the end of the week." My father barked a laugh. "You're going to arrest your own family." "No," I said, "I'm giving you a chance to cooperate. After that, it's out of my hands." Olivia began to cry, hands pressed to her mouth. I didn't know. Dad said it was all temporary. "You signed 2 of the accounts." I cut her off. "That's not temporary. That's accessory." My mother finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "We just wanted to give Olivia a start. You're strong. You could handle it." I looked them each in the eye. "You don't get to destroy someone because they're strong. You don't get to call it love when it's theft, and if you thought I'd just carry this quietly forever, then you never knew me at all." I turned and walked out, leaving them in the same silence they once handed me like a punishment. Because this time, silence was justice, and I was done being the family's scapegoat. I always thought facing betrayal would come with rage. But in truth, the next few days after confronting my family weren't fiery. They were hollow quiet, like the embers after a wildfire, still smoking but no longer hot. I was just tired. Brenna and I worked nonstop. She brought in her colleague Dana, the firm's financial crimes researcher, and the 2 of them began constructing what they called the fraud matrix. On the wall of our downtown office, colored Post-its outlined every account, loan, and fund linked to the name Reed Donovan. A red sticker meant forged, yellow meant suspected, blue meant confirmed by financial institutions. The wall looked like a war map. By Friday, there were 27 red stickers. On Saturday morning, Dana knocked on the conference room door with a single sheet of paper in her hand. "You're going to want to sit for this." I didn't. I read it standing. An offshore fund called Caliburn Yield Trust had been created using my credentials. It had already received over $2.3 million in private investments, most of it from aging retirees, business owners from my hometown, and some people I didn't even know. "They used my identity," I whispered. "But this isn't just theft, it's a con. They built a whole scheme around me." "Yes," Dana said. "And we believe it's being operated primarily by your mother. The fund lists her email hidden behind a forwarding domain that mimics your firm's website." I closed my eyes. My mother, the woman who made me sack lunches with handwritten notes, who cheered me on when I passed the bar, who always said, "Read, you carry our hopes." Now she was using that trust to steal from their friends their community. Brenna spoke next. "It's time to take this federal. This is beyond a civil matter. We've prepped the evidence for the Financial Crimes Unit." By Monday morning, the handoff was done. The feds didn't waste time. 2 plainclothes agents met with us at the Monterey courthouse, took our files, and informed us that surveillance had already started. My family didn't know it yet. But the walls were closing in, and that's when I got the message. "They're planning to leave the country. Your father booked 2 one-way flights to Portugal this morning. Alex, an investigator friend working quietly in the background." Within hours, the feds froze all associated accounts, halted wire transfers, and issued temporary hold orders on their passports. I wasn't sure if I should feel relief or grief. Probably both. That night, I walked down to the beach alone. The waves rolled quietly under a sky smeared with clouds. A few kids laughed in the distance near a driftwood bonfire. The world kept turning, unaware that in one small corner of it, a son had reported his own blood to the federal government. But I wasn't just doing this for me anymore. I was doing it for Mr. Finch. For the teacher who'd invested her retirement fund, for the 12 names on our victim list, and likely more to come. The next morning, my parents were summoned to the federal courthouse for questioning. They arrived looking like they still had control, pressed clothes, calm faces. Madison sorry. Olivia wasn't with them. She was home under house arrest, pending further investigation. When they saw me sitting at the far end of the courtroom, flanked by Brenna and the agents, my father's composure faltered for the first time. My mother wouldn't even meet my eyes. "We were just trying to build something for the family," she said in her statement. It got out of hand. Reed is exaggerating. The prosecutor slid a photo across the table. It showed her sitting in a luxury spa, champagne in hand, time-stamped 4 days after the 3rd fraudulent withdrawal. She said nothing after that. My father remained silent through most of it, until the prosecutor asked why he never told me any of it. Not even when things started spiraling. His answer was flat, because he would have said no. Exactly. The arraignment concluded with formal charges, filed financial fraud, identity theft, mail fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and unlawful operation of an unregistered investment fund. Bail was denied. Afterward, as they were led from the room, my father looked at me one last time. There was no anger in his eyes, just a strange sort of sadness. Maybe shame, I couldn't tell anymore. My mother didn't turn around, not even once. Outside the courthouse, I stood with Brenna and Dana as the sun broke through the clouds. "That's it then," I asked. "Trial in a few months?" "Yes," Brenna said. "And the case is strong. There's no escaping this." I nodded. "What happens now?" Dana asked. I looked toward the sea, just barely visible between 2 buildings. "Now," I said, "we help the people they hurt, and we make sure no one else carries the weight I had to." I took out my phone and opened an email I hadn't dared reply to until now. It was from the managing partner of a national legal nonprofit. They were launching a victim support program for financial abuse committed by family members and wanted me to lead the initiative. My finger hovered over reply. Then I hit send. The invitation was simple. "Mr. Donovan, we'd be honored if you'd speak at the inaugural summit of the National Coalition for Financial Survivors. Your case has already changed federal procedures. We'd like you to help change minds too." I didn't respond right away. In the weeks following the arraignment, I'd thrown myself into launching the Clean Ledger Project, the support initiative I'd agreed to lead under the guidance of the nonprofit. Every hour not spent at the firm was poured into coordinating resources, gathering stories, and connecting with victims of identity fraud, many at the hands of their families. Some days it felt like a support group with a law library attached. Other days it felt like triage after a battlefield. It wasn't just seniors. It wasn't just the poor. We had artists, engineers, single mothers, a retired Navy officer whose son had stolen over $200,000 in retirement funds. One woman, Ruth, in her 50s, showed up with a shoebox full of unopened bills and a confession her sister had used her information to open 5 credit cards. She had never spoken to anyone about it before. I was too embarrassed, Ruth said, eyes cast downward. Shame only grows in silence, I told her. Maybe that was the moment I knew I had to accept the summit invitation. When I arrived at the conference center in Phoenix, I expected a few rows of folding chairs. What I walked into was a ballroom filled with over 300 people. Many carrying folders, legal pads, or photos of their loved ones, some victims, some advocates, some just tired of being ignored. I stepped up to the podium. My heart thudded once. Then I began. I'm not here to make anyone feel better about betrayal, I said. Because there is nothing gentle about what many of us have lived through. I'm here to say you are not alone, and you are not weak. Heads nodded, some eyes welled. I told them the truth, not just about the financial wreckage, but the emotional fallout, how I had questioned every choice, blamed myself for not seeing it sooner, how I missed my mother's voice even now, how I sometimes still reach for the phone before remembering she wasn't who I thought she was. It's okay to grieve, I told them, but never again confuse forgiveness with permission. Afterward, people lined up to shake my hand. One elderly man clasped mine and whispered, "My daughter did the same thing. I thought I was the only one." Another young man hugged me tightly and said, "You saved me." I was going to give up. Their stories weren't mine, but they echoed mine in every way. When I flew back to Monterey, something inside me had shifted. I no longer carried the same weight of betrayal. Or maybe I had just grown stronger beneath it. The trial date loomed, but so did momentum. Local newspapers picked up the story. Then national outlets, and I was interviewed on a podcast about legal ethics. The firm asked me to speak at an upcoming legal symposium on personal conflict within professional boundaries. And then one afternoon, I received a letter. It was from Olivia, handwritten. Neat, a single page, no return address. Read, "I know you won't forgive me. I don't expect that I just wanted to tell you. I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for all the years I resented you for having your life together, while mine kept unraveling. I thought, if I could just borrow some of your shine, maybe I could fix myself. But all I did was take and destroy. I'll serve my time. I deserve it. But I hope one day you'll remember me as your sister, not the thief I became." I folded the letter slowly and placed it in the file with all the others, not to forget it, but to remember why I chose this path. The day the trial began, I walked into court not as a victim, but as a witness. I wasn't trembling, I wasn't bitter. I had found my purpose in the wreckage, and now I had a chance to help others do the same. One by one, victims gave their statements. I watched their strength pour out like rain after drought. Ruth, the woman with the shoebox, spoke too. "My sister told me I was too naive to notice," she said. "But today I noticed, and I'm speaking. And she's not invisible anymore. Justice wouldn't fix everything. But truth, it heals in layers." As court recessed for lunch, Brenna and I stood under a tree just outside the courthouse. Sunlight filtered through the branches, warm and silent. She looked at me. "You okay?" "I think I'm finally starting to be," I said. I pulled out my phone and opened a message from the nonprofit's director. "Let's take this national. You ready?" I looked up, wind in my face. Let's do it. 6 months after the trial, I stood in the center of a quiet auditorium, staring at the final draft of the Clean Ledger Project's national charter, freshly signed by 12 states. Brenna walked in from the side entrance, holding 2 coffee cups. "I saved your life," she joked. "This is real espresso." I laughed, tired and grateful. I don't even remember what sleep tastes like. She handed me the cup, then pointed toward the back of the room where a volunteer pinned up a new banner. "Truth over ties." That had become our unofficial slogan. 3 words that survivors across the country had adopted, not just clients, advocates, prosecutors, even social workers. People were tired of being told that family means forgiveness, no matter the damage. Not anymore. 2 months after my family was sentenced, I flew out to see Mrs. Helen Ward, one of the earliest victims, who'd lost nearly everything to the fake investment scheme. She now lived in a small apartment run by a nonprofit housing group we'd partnered with. When I walked in, she was watering a potted basil plant by the window. "You're late," she teased. "Dinner's been ready for an hour." We sat at a plastic folding table over pasta and simple red sauce. She didn't talk much about the money. She talked about her daughters, her late husband, her love of poetry, and how she felt like part of herself had returned after confronting the betrayal. "I used to think that getting old meant becoming invisible," she told me. "But this reminded me I still have a voice, and people are finally listening." She handed me a slip of paper before I left, just a few lines of a poem she'd written. "Not every theft leaves scars you can see, but in the silence, justice sets you free." I framed it above my desk. As we launched our national hotline, survivors poured in from across the country. An 18-year-old whose parents took out loans in his name to pay their back taxes, a 62-year-old nurse whose brother forged her documents to secure a second mortgage. Even a retired police officer, ashamed but furious, admitted that his wife had drained their joint account and taken out a credit card in his name. Each story was its own heartbreak, but each story also lit a torch. Some days were hard. I still got letters from Olivia one. Even came from prison, where she'd started a small peer group for female inmates who had committed financial crimes against their families. She called it second dignity. The name stung, but I understood the intent. I never replied, but I never blocked her either. You can set boundaries without erasing the past. One afternoon, Brenna found me staring at my office bookshelf, where all the legal binders were perfectly aligned, except one which had fallen sideways. "You always stare at that one," she said, "because it reminds me there's no such thing as perfect structure." I replied, "Even justice bends." She leaned against the wall beside me. "Do you ever think you'll talk to them again?" "My parents know Olivia." I hesitated. "Maybe, but only if she's willing to talk about what actually happened. No excuses, no tears, just truth." "Fair." Later that year, I was asked to speak before Congress during hearings on financial fraud reform. The bills introduced were aimed at increasing criminal penalties for identity theft within families and improving victim protections. The committee chair, a sharp-tongued senator from Maine, listened as I read from my statement. "I am not a cautionary tale. I am a consequence of the silence surrounding family fraud. It doesn't start with forged papers. It starts with a whisper. They need help. You can handle it." That's how people like me lose everything, until we speak. By the end of that session, bipartisan support emerged to push the first wave of legislation forward. I never imagined I'd help draft policy born from betrayal. But here we were, 1 year to the day after I first received that call from the bank. We held the Clean Ledger Memorial Vigil. It wasn't for those who had passed, but for what had been lost. Trust, reputations, futures. People wrote letters to their former selves and hung them on a wall of light. Some burned theirs afterward. I kept mine. Mine read, "Read. You didn't fail, they did, and you rose anyway." After the event, I stayed behind. Just me and the echoes of every voice that had filled the room that night. I looked at the wall, at the letters fluttering like small sails. I walked to the center and stood in front of them, letting the quiet settle. It wasn't vengeance that brought me here. It was clarity. Because in the end, we are not defined by the betrayals we endure. We are defined by what we build afterward. Not a perfect ledger, but a clean one. Story 2. My name's Daniel, and I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My brothers Aaron, Sean, and Blake, and my sister Julia are all older by at least a decade. Growing up, I always felt like the afterthought. They were busy graduating, getting jobs, and moving out, while I was still trying to figure out middle school. I idolized them. That's what you do when you're the youngest. You think your siblings are superheroes. I thought Aaron could do no wrong. Sean was the quiet genius. Julia was the cool sister I desperately wanted approval from. Blake was closer to my age, but even he kept his distance. Still, I tried to tag along. I thought, if I acted older, they'd let me in. That illusion shattered when Aaron got married. I was 11, old enough I thought to be part of the adult stuff. Aaron and his fiancée made it clear no kids at the wedding. I assumed that meant little kids, toddlers, not me, wrong. My parents sat me down, explained the no kids rule, and said I'd have to stay home with a sitter. I begged, I swore I'd behave. I even picked out a tie, didn't matter. I stayed home while my family went to celebrate. No apology from Aaron afterward, no wish you could have been there. Nothing. 2 years later, Sean got engaged. I was 13. I thought surely this time I'd be old enough. I had braces for crying out loud. I stayed quiet, didn't ask questions, played it cool. Same story, no kids. Stay home. I didn't cry this time. I just swallowed the hurt. When Julia got engaged, I was 16. Hope flickered again. She initially said kids were welcome, but after some extended family whining about children being disruptive, she changed the rule to no one under 18. I missed the cutoff by 8 months. I went to Julia, asked to be the exception. Politely, she said if she made one exception, she'd have to make more. It wouldn't be fair. I snapped, I yelled, my parents grounded me for disrespecting. Julia, 6 months, half a year for being upset, that once again, I didn't matter. By the time Blake announced his engagement when I was 18, I didn't even ask, I knew. And sure enough, child-free wedding, even though by then I was technically an adult. Apparently, the child part had become code for Daniel. I found out later that our cousin, who was 6 months older, got an invite. Guess turning 18 wasn't the magic key after all. I stopped trying after that, stopped chasing after siblings who didn't want me around. When I met my now wife, Sarah, a few years later, she was the first person who really listened. I told her everything. She was horrified. They excluded you like that, every single time. Yeah, I said, half laughing, half hurting. Guess I just wasn't family enough. When Sarah and I got engaged, I knew 2 things. 1, our wedding would be about real support, real family, real friends. 2, I wasn't inviting my siblings. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making a statement. I simply didn't see the point in including people who never included me. I didn't send invites. I didn't make an announcement. I just planned my wedding around the people who loved and showed up for me. 2 months before the wedding, my mom called. She was chipper, too chipper. Daniel, how's everything coming along? Your brothers and sister haven't gotten their invites yet. Did something get lost in the mail? No, Mom, I didn't invite them. Silence. Then the explosion. What do you mean you didn't invite your family? They're your siblings. They didn't think I was family when it was their turn. I said calmly, I'm just returning the favor. The guilt-tripping came immediately. You're being spiteful. You're overreacting. Family is family. I held my ground. I want people there who actually want me around. Cue the angry group chat messages. First Julia, pretending she was confused. Then Aaron bluntly asking, "What's your problem?" Sean sent a paragraph about forgiveness. Blake just sent a thumbs-down emoji, classic. I didn't respond. Sarah saw me brooding over my phone and said, "You don't owe them anything. Let them talk, focus on your day." She was right. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to fight for a seat at a table that clearly didn't want me there. Of course, that was just the beginning. The fallout from not inviting my siblings to my wedding grew louder before it ever died down. After the ceremony, after the lights dimmed and the last song played, I thought, maybe, just maybe, the storm had passed. Tyler and I were starting our life together in peace, building something new and clean away from the mess I'd left behind. I felt good, free almost. But of course, I should have known better. It started subtle. My cousin Jenna sent me a few screenshots. Rachel had gone full martyr on social media. Family is supposed to stick together, even when things are hard. It's sad when some people forget that. She posted with a photo collage of old family pictures, ones that conveniently left me out. I laughed when I saw it. It was almost funny how predictable it was. Rachel, always the performer, making herself the tragic heroine. Chris chimed in too, leaving vague comments about forgiving those who hurt us and grace in the face of betrayal. Honestly, if they spent half as much time reflecting on their own behavior as they did making Facebook posts, we wouldn't be here. I ignored it. Tyler helped. Whenever he caught me brooding over my phone, he'd just gently take it from my hands and say, "Let's live our lives. They're not in it anymore." But my mom, she wasn't letting go so easily. She started sending messages. First, she tried guilt. "Your siblings are devastated. Rachel's been crying for days." Then she moved on to anger. "You're being selfish and cruel. Emily, I raised you better than this." Every message chipped away at me, even though I didn't respond. Not because I doubted my choice. I didn't, but because no matter how strong you are, hearing your own mother call you cruel hurts. Then came the unexpected visit. It was a Saturday. Tyler and I had just finished reorganizing our bookshelves because that's the kind of wild married life we were living when there was a knock at the door. I felt it in my gut before I even looked through the peephole. My parents. I opened the door cautiously. There they were standing like statues. My mom with her arms crossed tight, my dad looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. They asked to come in. Against my better judgment, I let them. They didn't waste time. "Emily," my mom started, "we need to fix this." "There's nothing to fix," I said evenly. "You're tearing this family apart," she said, her voice rising. I stayed calm. "No, Mom, I just finally stopped pretending I was part of a family that never cared about me." My dad stepped in, voice low and gruff. "You're holding on to childish grudges. I was a child when you all left me out." I snapped. "Now I'm an adult, and I'm choosing not to let you hurt me anymore." Silence. Thick, uncomfortable silence. "We didn't know it hurt you so much," my mom said, finally, tears brimming in her eyes. "You didn't care to know," I corrected. "You all made your choices, now I'm making mine." My mom begged. She cried. She pleaded with me to think about the family. My dad just stood there, silent, stewing. I didn't budge. When they finally left after a lot of slammed doors and shouted words, I sat down on the couch shaking. Tyler wrapped his arms around me. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Yeah," I said. And it was true, I was sad, sure, mourning the idea of what I always wanted my family to be. But I wasn't second-guessing myself. I didn't hear from them for a while after that, a few weeks of blissful silence. Then the final straw. One evening, Jenna texted me again. "Hey," she wrote, "you might want to see this." I opened the attachment. Rachel had organized a family reconciliation dinner. She invited a bunch of extended relatives, and the caption read, "Trying to heal after the pain caused by certain people who chose division over love." They'd turned me into the villain. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even surprised. I was just done. Tyler sat beside me as I deleted the message and blocked a few more numbers. "They can have their dinners." I said, "They can have their pity parties. They just won't have me." He squeezed my hand. Their loss. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. Their loss. Not mine. Weeks passed, and the quiet that followed was almost unsettling. No angry texts, no desperate phone calls, just silence. I think a part of me had braced for some final dramatic showdown. But instead, it was like they all just disappeared. In the beginning, I kept checking my phone out of habit, expecting another passive-aggressive message or guilt trip, but nothing came. And slowly, I let myself settle into the calm. Tyler and I started building the kind of life I always dreamed of. It was simple, but full late nights, cooking meals together, spontaneous weekend trips, small traditions like walking to the local coffee shop every Sunday morning. There was no pretending, no walking on eggshells. I didn't have to earn love here, I just had it. One afternoon, a few months after the wedding, I ran into an old family friend at the grocery store. Mrs. Dalloway. She used to babysit me sometimes when I was little. She smiled warmly when she saw me. "Emily, my goodness, you look radiant," she said, pulling me into a hug. We chatted for a few minutes about small things, then she hesitated. "I heard a little about what happened with your family." She said carefully, "I just want you to know you did the right thing. Some people confuse family loyalty with allowing themselves to be mistreated." I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't even realized was still tight. I thanked her, and when I walked out of the store, groceries in hand, I cried a little. Not out of sadness, out of relief, out of finally being seen, even if it wasn't by the people I thought would be there. Later that night, I told Tyler about it. "It's strange," I said, curling up next to him on the couch. "All my life I thought if I just tried harder they'd notice me, they'd want me. But now I realize it wasn't about me. It was never about me." He kissed the top of my head. "They chose not to see you, Em. You didn't fail. They did." We sat there for a long time, not saying much, just feeling the weight of that truth settle between us. After that, something shifted inside me. I stopped looking backward. I stopped replaying every slight, every missed birthday, every ignored text. I stopped wondering if they'd ever apologize. I realized, even if they did, it wouldn't change anything. Some wounds heal without closure. Some chapters close without a neat ending. Around Christmas, Tyler and I hosted a little dinner with our friends and his family. There was laughter, homemade pie, bad karaoke in the living room. It wasn't the kind of big, polished family gathering. My parents always insisted we put on all appearances, no heart. It was messy and warm and real. At one point, as we were cleaning up the dishes, I caught Tyler watching me with this soft, proud smile. "What?" I asked, laughing. "Just, you seem happy." He said, "I am." I said simply, "I really, really am." And I meant it. A week later, I got one last letter in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable, my mom's. I opened it slowly. Sitting at the kitchen table, Tyler was working in the next room. But he looked up when he heard the paper tear. Inside, the letter was short, just a few lines. "Emily, we're sorry you felt left out. That was never our intention. You'll always be part of this family, whether you like it or not. If you ever want to come home, we'll be here. Love, Mom and Dad." I stared at it for a long time, feeling nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a quiet, steady certainty. I folded the letter once neatly and tucked it into a drawer. Not because I planned to answer it, but because it felt like a fitting place. For it tucked away part of the past, but no longer something that controlled me. That night, Tyler and I sat on the balcony, sipping hot chocolate under a blanket. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Yeah," I said, looking up at the stars. "I'm finally okay. I didn't go home. I didn't call them back. I didn't answer the letter. Because home wasn't there anymore. It was here in the life I built for myself. In the family I chose. And for the first time, I wasn't looking back." Story 3. My name's Logan. I'm 16 now. And if you told me even a year ago that getting kicked out of my own house would be the best thing that ever happened to me, I would have laughed in your face. Growing up, it wasn't exactly a secret that I wasn't the favorite. I was the weird kid, shy, awkward, into books and video games, instead of sports or parties. Meanwhile, my older sister Madison was everyone's golden girl. Popular, pretty homecoming queen, all that. But even knowing that I never thought it would come to this, it all started on my 16th birthday. I didn't expect a huge celebration or anything. We were never that kind of family, but I thought maybe they'd at least fake a smile, get me a cake from the grocery store. Instead, I woke up to Mom and Dad sitting at the kitchen table looking weirdly excited. "Pack your stuff, Logan," my dad said, sipping his coffee like he was telling me we were out of milk. I blinked at them. "What?" Mom smiled like this was some kind of present. "You're moving out? Your Uncle Ben has agreed to take you in." Apparently, Madison and her boyfriend Cody needed space. Madison was 8 months pregnant, and they needed a nursery and a family-friendly environment, which apparently didn't include me. Our house had 4 bedrooms, but now they needed 3 of them. One for Madison and Cody, one for the baby, and one for my parents, obviously. That left me. I wasn't even angry at first. I just sat there numb while they explained how generous they were being. They'd cover my basic expenses until I turned 18, rent, food, school supplies. but I had to go. Madison wasn't even there for the conversation. They probably planned it that way so she wouldn't have to see the fallout. I packed my things into trash bags, because of course nobody offered boxes. No party, no presents, just me folding up my life. And when they dropped me off at Uncle Ben's house, they didn't even wait for me to reach the front door before driving away. Ben opened the door, saw the bags, and immediately pulled me into a hug. It broke something loose in me. I hadn't cried in years, but I broke down right there on his doorstep. He listened quietly while I told him everything: the birthday, the gift, the coldness. His jaw clenched tighter with every word. Without another word, he disappeared into the other room. A few minutes later, I heard him yelling on the phone. Ben never yelled. When he came back, he looked furious, but determined. He handed me a pint of ice cream and sat next to me, his voice low, but steady. They lied to me. He said, "They told me this was your idea, that you wanted to move out." I shook my head, fresh tears welling up. "I'm sorry, kiddo," Ben said. "But you're safe now. You're not going anywhere you don't want to go." I believed him. That night, after he went to bed, I sat on the couch staring at my phone. I was angry. Not just at the birthday, at everything. Years of being invisible. Years of being the backup plan. The mistake they didn't know what to do with. So I posted about it. I wrote out the whole story, the favoritism, the move, the way they abandoned me without a second thought. I didn't name names, but I was honest, brutally honest. I hit post, threw my phone across the couch, and tried to sleep. By the time I picked my phone back up an hour later, the post had gone viral, but not in the way I'd hoped. Relatives, family, friends, people from my school. Everyone saw it. I had dozens of DMs, some supportive, some furious. Most shocking of all, messages from my parents and Madison. The texts from my parents were pure rage. "Delete it? You're embarrassing us. We did nothing wrong." The message from Madison was different. "Can we talk?" I ignored all of them. Ben saw the post the next morning. When I showed him, I braced for a lecture. Instead, he just nodded. "You needed to tell your story," he said. "Don't apologize for that." I wanted to hug him again, but I just said, "Thanks," and we left it at that. For about a week, I thought maybe the worst was over. Then they showed up at my school. They were waiting for me outside the school gates. Dad pacing, face red. Mom standing stiff with that fake smile she used when she was furious, but trying to pretend otherwise. Madison wasn't there just then. I had half a mind to turn around and walk the other way. But my friends, who already knew everything, immediately picked up on the tension. They formed a loose circle around me, like a human shield. "Logan," Dad barked, "we need to talk." I ignored him, kept walking. He shouted again, louder this time, and some other students started staring. That's when I finally stopped, turned around slowly. "I don't have anything to say to you," I said, my voice flat. "We're your parents," Mom hissed. "You will come with us." No. They looked thrown off, like they couldn't believe I was standing my ground. Dad's hand twitched like he was debating grabbing me, but thankfully he didn't. "We just want to fix this," Mom said, voice sugar sweet. "You can come back home." That stopped me. Home? Now they wanted me back, after they'd thrown me out like last week's trash. I narrowed my eyes. "Why?" Dad glanced around at the watching students and leaned closer. His voice dropped. "Your grandparents found out what you posted. They're furious. They said if we don't make things right, they're cutting us out of the will." And there it was. Not love, not guilt, not even shame. Just money. They didn't want me back. They wanted their inheritance. I looked them dead in the eye and said no. Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. Dad opened his mouth to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned and walked away, without another word. I could hear them shouting behind me, but I didn't turn back. When I got home, I told Uncle Ben everything. He listened quietly, his hands gripping his coffee mug tighter and tighter. "They don't want you," he finally said. "They want what you represent." I nodded. I already knew that. But it still hurt to hear it out loud. Ben decided we needed to move fast. He called his lawyer the next morning and started filing paperwork for legal custody. As long as my parents still had rights, they could make my life miserable. That needed to change. Meanwhile, my grandparents, who I hadn't seen in person for over a year, called me. My grandpa's voice cracked a little when he said, "We had no idea Logan none." I believed him. My parents were good at pretending, good at making everything seem normal when the family was around. Grandma chimed in too, her voice fierce. "We're making sure you stay with Ben. We'll cover anything you need." For the first time in a long time, I felt hope blooming in my chest. Maybe I wasn't alone after all. But peace didn't last long. A couple days later, Dad sent an email, not angry this time, just pathetic. He whined about how hard things had gotten for him and Mom since the post, how their friends at work found out, how people were judging them unfairly. He ended it by saying, "You've ruined our lives, Logan. Hope you're happy." I didn't even bother replying. They had ruined their own lives. All I had done was tell the truth. While that was unfolding, Madison kept texting too. At first, I ignored her, unsure what she could possibly have to say. But after the third message, I didn't know. "Please, let's talk." I agreed to meet up. I went to her boyfriend Cody's apartment where she was staying. Madison looked rough, tired, pale, clearly stressed. The first thing she did when I walked in was apologize. "I'm sorry for never standing up for you," she said, voice trembling. "I should have done more." I didn't know what to say. I'd spent so long thinking of her as part of the problem, not someone who might feel guilty about it. Then she dropped a bombshell. She hadn't asked for my room. She hadn't even wanted to move back in with Mom and Dad. They begged me to stay. She said, "I didn't know they were kicking you out to make room." Apparently she found out after it happened. And when she read my post online, she packed up and moved back out immediately. Now she wasn't even speaking to our parents. They'd called her selfish, ungrateful, all the usual guilt trips. Sounded familiar. By the time I left Cody's apartment, I didn't know exactly how to feel. Sad, I guess, for all the years wasted thinking Madison was just like them. Maybe she had been a little. But at least she was trying now. And me? I finally understood that just because someone's related to you doesn't mean they deserve a place in your life. Weeks rolled by. The court date came faster than I expected. Uncle Ben took the day off work dressed in a clean button-up and jeans, just formal enough to look serious, but not like he was trying to impress anyone. I wore my best clothes too, feeling like I needed to show the judge that I wasn't some kid caught up in petty drama. I was here because I deserved better. Inside the courtroom, the air felt heavy. Mom and Dad sat across from us, looking like they hadn't slept in days. I caught Mom's sneaking glances at me. But I didn't look back. I didn't owe her that. The judge read through the paperwork, slowly asking a few quiet questions. Then he asked me directly, "Logan, is this what you want?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir, I want to live with my uncle." A few minutes later, it was done. Ben was now my legal guardian. Mom started crying. Dad looked furious, but they didn't say anything. Maybe they knew they didn't have a leg to stand on anymore. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt like I'd shed 100 pounds of invisible weight. That night, Ben ordered pizza, and we sat on the couch watching bad action movies until midnight. It was the happiest I'd been in years. Later, he gave me a small wrapped box. Inside was a key, my own key to the house. "No matter what happens," he said, "you'll always have a home here." I nodded, unable to speak, past the lump in my throat. It wasn't just a house key, it was proof that someone wanted me around. A few days later, I found out the full story behind why Mom and Dad finally agreed to sign away their rights. It wasn't because they had a sudden change of heart. It wasn't because they realized they were wrong. It was the money. Grandma and Grandpa gave them an ultimatum: sign away custody and walk away with half of their inheritance, or fight for me and lose everything. Guess which option they chose? Ben told me over dinner one night, and we both laughed. Bitter laughter, sure, but laughter all the same. They showed you who they really are. Ben said, "And you listened. That's more than a lot of people manage." He was right. And weirdly, that made me proud of myself. For once, I hadn't let my heart talk me into giving people second, third, fourth chances they didn't deserve. For once, I had chosen myself. Madison stayed in touch too. She was getting closer to her due date and battling her own war with our parents. They were blowing up her phone daily, demanding she come back, guilt-tripping her, trying every trick in the book. But Madison was holding firm. "I'm not bringing my baby into that mess." She said during one of our calls, "I'm breaking the cycle. I'm done pretending they're better people than they are." It felt good knowing I wasn't alone anymore. We weren't the perfect siblings now, not by a long shot. There were still awkward silences and things we didn't know how to say. But there was effort, real effort. That meant more than I could put into words. Months passed. Ben helped me find a therapist, someone who specialized in family trauma. At first, I hated going. Talking about feelings wasn't exactly my thing, but slowly it helped. I stopped blaming myself for things that weren't my fault. I stopped wondering what was wrong with me that made my parents treat me the way they did. Turns out the answer was simple. There was never anything wrong with me. They just weren't good parents. The first real holiday season without my parents came fast. Thanksgiving. Ben asked if I wanted to invite Madison and Cody over, maybe even a few friends. I hesitated. Part of me felt weird celebrating without the whole big family gathering I'd grown up expecting, but the bigger part of me remembered how those gatherings always felt. Cold, full of forced smiles and whispered judgments. So I said yes, and it was amazing. We cooked together, burnt the turkey a little, laughed over stupid jokes, ate way too much pie. It wasn't a perfect Hallmark movie. Thanksgiving, it was better. It was real. For the first time sitting around that table, I felt like I had a family. Not because we shared blood, but because we chose to care about each other. Ben raised his glass at the end of the night. To family, he said, "The kind you make, not the kind you're stuck with." We all clinked glasses, and I felt something deep inside me settle. Not everything in life would be easy. I knew that. But I also knew that from now on, I had people in my corner. People who saw me, who valued me, and honestly, that's all I ever really wanted. If you're someone who's ever felt like the outsider in your own family, like you have to earn love, that should be given freely, let me tell you something. You're not broken. You're not too much or not enough. You're not the problem. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you simply don't know how. And when that happens, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to choose yourself. You deserve to be loved fully, freely, without conditions. Never let anyone make you believe otherwise.